I've really I've kind of laid out the arguments for the independent party, right? Um, but just to quote Marx, even when there is no prospect whatsoever of being elected, the workers must put up their own candidates in order to preserve their independence, to count their forces, and to bring before the public their revolutionary attitude and party standpoint. In this connection, they must not allow themselves to be seduced by arguments of the Democrats, as for example, that by doing so they are splitting the Democratic Party and making it possible for reactionaries to win. The ultimate intention of such phrases is to dupe the proletariat to the advance which the proletariat party is bound to make by such independent action is indefinitely more important than a disadvantage it might be incurred by a few reactionaries in the representative body, right? So even going back to Marx, right? And we talked about this in our strategy. A lot of electoral power in the United States, for worse, right? This isn't a for better or worse. This is a for worse situation. There's not really a for better. But for worse, a lot of the power in the United States is sequestered in electoral politics, right? We can get involved in building parallel institutions. We can get involved in mutual aid and things like that, and we do, and we should. But a lot of the actual power to change things is sequestered into electoral politics. So, kind of by that argument, and Marx is here, making that argument over a century and a half ago, right? We can't just give it up. That doesn't mean we're all in 100% electoral, right? We go back. We're both an activist organization and a electoral party. But we can't just abandon electoralism. If we abandon electoralism, we abandon most power to the capitalist class, right? That if we aren't running and challenging them, then they're the only ones who can win. So we've got to, kind of find this balance, and it's the throughout the history of the party, it's often been, kind of positioned as a either or, where are we an electoral party or are we a movement? And we have to stop that either or. They're not mutually exclusive, and in fact, they're mutually dependent. If we're going to have success as a movement and actually bring about change, we have to have people in power to actually, raise our points to victory and not just co-opt them, which is what we get out of the Democratic Party. And if we, want to succeed in running, we need the support of our community and the movements. So we have to be involved in these two things, and it's a balancing act that every local is going to have to figure out. Where are you in your current development as a local or state party, right? Do you need to be in the building phase where you might want to focus more on the movement side, or do you have a solid base that might actually be able to win, and you need to get your focus reoriented towards running serious candidates. And that's another thing Greens need to really focus on: serious candidates, not just candidates, but serious candidates. The problems that we face, right? The problems of our kind of doomsday capitalism that we're in right now, like, they're so huge that a lot of times Greens just feel the need to do something, and they don't do it effectively. They just have to do it. They have to act. And they don't put the work into building a base. They don't put the work into building a solid strategy. They don't put the work into, targeting where they're, running people. And they just declare they're running for a race, and they put up a mediocre campaign and they lose. And they go on with their day until 2 years later when they feel they have to do something, right? So we've got to make sure we're running quality candidates. This part, this idea of independence is often talked of as a strategy, right? Is the inside out strategy of Bernie and DSA, or is it a outside strategy that the Greens and other independent socialists come from, orient around? But I'm very much from the perspective that when we kind of posit it as a strategy question, we're actually completely undermining socialism if we're socialists, right? Socialism is independent of capitalism, right? Socialism doesn't, go within capitalism and seek to change it. That's not really, how that works. We can't go into the Democratic Party, which is through and through democratic or through and through capitalist, right? I mean, they say it, right? Pelosi and Biden, all their leadership say it. We are a capitalist party, period, full stop, no question marks, right? And so when we can't go within that and actually, implement the changes we want, because that party is ideologically opposed to what we're fighting for. So independence isn't really a strategy to me. It's a pillar of socialist organizing. If we're not independent of capital, are we not just pawns of capital? So that's something that like I said, one of the topics we may do as a 101 this year is independent politics and diving deeper into that. So again, the Green Party is both an activist organization and an electoral party, right? And it's a multi-tendency party, right? We have a lot of people with different views. I work closely. I come from more of like a bottom left anarcho-communist. I'm a solid Marxist, but again, then Garrett comes from more of a like Bookchin municipalist background. And then, one of my closest people who brought me into the National Party is a Marxist-Leninist, right? And then we've got progressive, capitalists, because that's what progressives are, right? They're just liberals. It's a new word for liberal. They're New Deal liberals as opposed to neoliberals, is probably the best way to see it. But we've got plenty of New Deal liberals in here as well. But as of 2016, the Green Party is explicitly an anti-capitalist party. And so we've got this wide tendency. And the great part about that wide tendency and the dual, action of activist and electoral is if you're not interested in electoral, you work on the movement side. And if you're not interested in the movement, you work on the electoral side. And you, instead of working in parallel, they're part of the same, strategy.